Hi, I'm doing fine, and I'm joining you from my home in St. Pete, Florida. Um,
Nice.
yes, yes. Uh, in this location for a couple years now.
He's
It's
local
been
to
I
me.
do. I've been trying to get close to the beach my whole life, and I'm finally here. So, love the water, love the weather, and I've got a job that I like too, so it's all good. Yeah, I'm currently the lead psychiatrist for primary care and mental health integration at the VA here in Bay Pines, Florida. It's the same county as St. Pete, basically St. Pete, but it's big enough that it has its own post office. So it's Bay Pines, and we cover the area from Naples all the way out up to the Clearwater. So it's a pretty broad swath. And I like the fact that we're integrating mental health back into primary care. And as part of that, we work very closely with Whole Health Initiative in the VA, where they're really bringing in complementary and alternative medicine sorts of things that includes acupuncture. I'm really pushing them to look to include the NADA style acupuncture and have a proposal on the table actually to do a Shin Men Beat study on the inpatient unit, looking at aggression and anxiety in vets. So there's a lot of openness here, and I'm hoping that things regarding NADA will grow, with the influence I can exert. So. Yeah, I've heard it said that each VA is kind of like a kingdom unto itself, and so yeah, they do make their own rules. I can tell you though, in the NADA proposals that I'm giving here, I'm drawing heavily on what was done at the McGuire VA in Richmond, Virginia, by one of NADA's own, Mark Farrington, who was a former vice president of NADA. But he's had a NADA-based chronic pain group that's been going on for years. And recently learned from Claudia, fingers across, that she'll be working at the VA in Texas and perhaps be able to introduce that as part of their whole health there. So as it grows and we get more demonstration projects and as the evidence grows, hopefully, we won't need to look to open hands so much, but they'll be outstretched asking us to come in. So that's what we're hoping for. Yeah. I and my colleagues that include Michelle Oshan Perlmutter. She works at Atrium Health in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a large healthcare system. I worked there. We worked together in the psychiatry department for over a decade until I moved, and we performed the project in collaboration with John Marks, who's a professor at Winthrop University in the sociology department. And so we were really demonstrating, even in terms of our research, that cross-disciplinary fertilization can be very, very, very productive. So, so the BEAT study that was published last summer looked at healthcare workers and burnout and anxiety in behavioral healthcare workers across the Atrium system, both inpatient, outpatient, emergency room, outpatient settings, and the results reached statistical significance in terms of benefit with regard to decreasing burnout and anxiety. We'd like to point out that those findings are likely to be much more robust in a more distressed population. For instance, even though the work of those in mental health, behavioral health can be very stressful, we do have jobs, we do have food, we do have a roof over our head. If you're coming to work, at least that says you're not in the midst of environmental trauma, that can compromise all of that. And so to get findings so robust that they reach statistical significance in behavioral healthcare workers, simply using a beat and Shin Men gives us confidence that as we look at more comparative studies where we have a randomized arm of NADA plus treatment as usual compared to treatment as usual, we're fully expecting the findings to be even more robust in a more distressed population of patients that are often dealing with a lot. So, well, I would bet that Sarah has it available through the website. But this study was actually published through Behavioral Sciences. So if you Google my name, it should pop up. It's called acupressure, not acupressure for burnout and anxiety in behavioral health care workers. Well, it's interesting. I was a medical student at the time and had, in collaboration with and consultation with my my mentor in Newark, New Jersey. I took a year off from medical school, and my plan was to travel around the country, visiting places where holistic health was being used for patients that were very sick, as much to convince myself that it worked for people who were very sick. And I ended up going to, was directed to Lincoln. I didn't want to go to Lincoln originally, really wanting to really tap more into African American, Indigenous American, which speaks to both sides of my family, and really wanted to tap into that stream, even in terms of traditional East Asian medicine. So I was looking for medicines that had its growth with the ancestral wisdom of Black and Brown people, which I felt was a real deficit in my medical school education. And so when my mentor directed me to Mike Smith in the Bronx, I had some initial resistance saying, hey, man, I'm looking for something else. I mean, I see he's a white guy, and he said, no, but he's cool. He's got it going on. He really knows what's happening with this. And it's a multicultural collaboration of Black and Brown and white. And that's what we really want, is to bring humanity's ageless wisdom to bear on the many problems that we face. So I ended up going to Lincoln, and it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. So, and as throughout my professional career, I've held on to it. I like to say it's the next best thing to sliced bread. And even now, as a board certified psychiatrist, I also went on to get a degree as a master's in public health, and finally actually became board certified through the NCCAOM as an acupuncturist. And through all of that, I can tell you, and I guess before I moved to Florida, for about more than a decade, I had worked in a dedicated psychiatry emergency room, doing a lot of inpatient work. I mean, with the sickest of the sick in terms of behavioral health and mental health. I can tell you, for most things that come in the door, the use of the NADA protocol is just as good as any pharmaceutical we can provide. And of course, the likelihood of any adverse outcome or risk with NADA is minuscule. And so I think the question should be asked, why should we not reach for this as a first intervention? Not whether we should, not if it works, the evidence is there. I've contributed to that base myself through a number of publications with the team I mentioned. I've worked with in Charlotte, North Carolina, with Michelle, and Jonathan Marks is a sociology professor at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina, across the state line. So we've had a number of publications, but even outside of what I've done myself, the evidence basis there is indisputable. And the only question now is how much more we can do to get the word out and to educate those who need to know of what a wonderful tool this is. So, I tell you, the older I get, the more I'm really reminded of my roots in the South, growing up in a Baptist fire and brimstone Baptist tradition in the South. And the songs my grandparents and great-grandparents and aunts and uncles would sing about the old-time religion, I'm reminded of that. And as a metaphor for what we're learning throughout medicine and even the revolution, in the words of Andrew Weil, that is taking place in healthcare now with the movement toward integrative. All of these integrative thrusts are drawing on ancestral healthcare systems that are ancient. We're talking about, if we look at, say, the Okinawan Japanese, having the longest lifestyle, the longest lived lives in the world. They don't have a hospital on every corner. They don't, rely on pharmaceuticals. They have a diet, they have a lifestyle, they have an internal tradition of meditation and mindfulness. If we look at the East Indian traditions in terms of yoga, we look at Tai Chi, we look at the Native American traditions from sweat lodges to the use of herbals and other substances to help with the transformation of consciousness into a more mindful setting. All of these things are ancestral sorts of things. My direct link to that sort of old time religion for me, in my lifetime, it goes back to Lincoln and what I've studied with my mentors. When I think about my time at Lincoln in '82, I think about it as a golden age, where it really was a multicultural, a melting pot. When I trained there was no separation between the ear acupuncture and those that would come in off the street, whether it's from the streets of the South Bronx where the clinic was located, or driving in from further north in Westchester County, more affluent areas would come there as well for treatment for everything from stroke to back pain to, in addition to the core mission of addressing the distress of substance use and substance misuse problems. So what I saw there, even before I left medical school, left me with no doubt that all the answers we need are not in the future. They don't require tons of additional research to prove something. Part of it involves the will, the recognition, the acknowledgement that a lot of what we already have can address the needs that are pressing in our society and healthcare system today, with cost efficiency and with the sort of efficacy that if it was a pill, pharmaceutical companies would be all over it, and we'd be paying out the wazoo to try to get it. So, yeah. It's through Mike that I was introduced to Europe back in the day. I'd just like to give acknowledgement to Michael Smith. I mean, he was a phenomenal guy, and he gave from his heart. If anyone was doing anything of merit, he would donate from his pocketbook. He's always been there for me. And so that picture was actually taken at a NADA Europe conference where I, amongst others, presented. And the NADA Europe conferences take place every other year. If you can make it, I encourage you to think about it. The last one that I went to was in Denmark, hosted by Lars and Meta. It was phenomenal. They rolled out the red carpet for us. And they trained so many thousands in Denmark. It kind of reminds me of how the jazz artists, in the earlier part of the 1900s, often had to leave the U.S. to go to Europe to get the recognition that they deserved. I can tell you, in Denmark and other places in Europe, the NADA protocol is really front and central. Of course, in some countries in Europe, where they still need more education and more guidance in terms of its value, just like we find in California and Florida here, where some states have been fiercely oppositional to NADA and really quite tardy in recognizing where the rank and file of the acupuncture memberships are in terms of wanting to embrace NADA. But again, that was a conference that stands out in my mind. There are many places in Europe where NADA is just overwhelmingly being used as a matter of course, with no questions asked. And all of us are continuing to generate more and more data as observations, whether it's large volume studies like they did at Lincoln with hundreds and thousands of cases to refer to, or whether it's anecdotal studies, whether it's smaller studies looking at substance use, looking at things as difficult to treat as eating disorders. So some of that, a lot of that is coming out of Europe, and the conferences there speak to that. The conference that I was there with Mike and Nancy, Joanne, and Sheila Murphy and Carlos, and I don't remember if Carlos was there. I have to speak to that. But we do go every couple of years, and it's always a blast. So yeah, this is a story I like to tell whenever I give a talk. But when I trained at Lincoln in 1982, I'm a medical student, so I come in and I'm thinking we start off with just like medical school, you have 2 years of didactic before you put hands on anybody. So I came in expecting reading materials. What can I read? What can I do? What can I do? And I was told by Mike and Carlos, hold on, it's not that kind of party. We want you to get a treatment first. And so I sit down, I get a treatment, and like I say, I love the beach, love the water. I woke up about a half hour later feeling like I'd been at the beach all day. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. So, time goes on, and a couple days later, I'm learning the points and finally ready to treat someone. And don't you know, the first person Mike directed me to was a guy who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He had been smoking crack all night long and was having command auditory hallucinations telling him to kill himself. So of course, I'm a medical student, I'm not a psychiatrist yet, and I'm directed to this guy, and so I'm scared, thinking, well, wow, if he wants to kill himself, what's he gonna do if I stick a needle in his ear? What's he gonna do to me? So but I go up and treat him, and he was very compliant. He falls asleep. I'm sitting there staring at him, just wondering if he's going to spring up and do something wild at any moment. He wakes up about a half an hour later, and he's a different person. I mean, the jitteriness and the wide-eyed, signs of distress and alarm are gone. The voices are still there, but they are greatly diminished, and they are not commanding him to kill himself anymore. So, and he could have a conversation.
Yeah.
Now, to have that sort of experience then, and then later on in my training as a psychiatrist, to realize what we would typically use for a patient like that, if they came to an emergency room, you can't really talk to them unless it's a welcoming sort of an atmosphere, like our style of NADA use. Their sense of apprehension, but this guy would keep coming back. Even though he wasn't yet clean and sober, it would assist with harm reduction and exposure to the volume of substances he would use. You could treat him without the use of, say, a benzodiazepine like Ativan, or an antipsychotic, neuroleptic like a Haldol. That would certainly calm him down, but it would also likely put him to sleep and knock him out. So now you're talking about extended use of even emergency resources in terms of space and time that may be unnecessary if you start to incorporate the NADA style approach. So even the very first patient I ever treated with the protocol really was an oracle of sorts for where my career was going to go after that. Well, I can tell you, I was so enthusiastic that, even in my residency program, I tried to introduce it. Well, we want you to be a good psychiatrist first. We got to do all this other stuff first. I'm like, okay. Then I decided, I started a private practice when I left residency, and immediately started to use the protocol, and then was directed to go into a psych epidemiology fellowship that turned into a master's of public health, because I really wanted to be able to know what the science was behind what I was doing, rather than be trained in a sense of adopting a religion. without really knowing very well and thoroughly the science behind it. So it's through that sort of exposure, at Columbia, where I really got familiar with research and the science behind mental health and psychiatry. And shortly after I finished that, Mike actually asked would I be interested and willing to move to DC to work as part of SAMHSA CSAC, which is a Center for Substance Abuse Treatment through NIH. They were doing a demonstration project on drug diversion through the DC Superior Court. And I said, yeah, I'd very much be willing to do it. So I moved to into the DC area and worked for a number of years on that demonstration project that turned into material for TIP number 45, the Treatment Improvement Protocol number 45. I wrote basically pages 102 through 104. And it was the first time in US history that they endorsed and what was then called an alternative or complementary medicine as a best practice. And so wherever I've gone in my career since, I've always brought along the NADA protocol because it really is the next best thing to sliced bread. And if you don't know about it, you need to find out because it's fantastic. The simplicity of it. Of course, at Lincoln, with what I refer to as the golden age, it was first practice in a folk medicine sense, without the need for state authorized credentials or licensing. It was practiced by those in the community who wanted to help their peers and the loved ones that they encountered who were going through a terrible time of heroin epidemic and its sequelae. All the, revealing of health disparities that we find now in the midst of COVID-19 were there then. They're still there now. And the idea of trauma is so pervasive that you've got to have something that's simple and easy and that can be population-based, whole health-based in its orientation. Lincoln already had that. They were the leaders in integrative care that got that fancy name as time went on. And as it gained a more official sorts of recognition, and my at the time I came along, it was at a transition period where it was gaining that sort of state and recognition and national recognition because they had started to give out ADS certificates that, of course, was not part of the original operation of Lincoln for those that got it started and learned early on. But as you mentioned, my ADS certificate number is 17. And so I was there when it first started to make that transition into the mainstream. So there are things when you move into the mainstream that are lost and some things are gained. I mean, you gain a wider audience potentially, but what you can sometimes lose is what we like to call the spirit of NADA, which is that thrust for service, to serve those members of your community. In jurisdictions where certification and licensure is required, we have to observe that, especially if you're going to work inside of a healthcare organization, or if you're seeking the certification of recognized bodies and organizations who do that. I can tell you from a practical standpoint, it's unnecessary. I mean, in the 40 years, more than going on 50 years now that the protocol has been in existence, there has never been one lawsuit in terms of a malpractice case regarding an adverse outcome from the use of the NADA protocol. Not one. You can't point to anything else in medicine that we have or do with that sort of track record. So, and so even though we have to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, unless we want to pay the penalties for that, and every person has to decide that for themselves, but there's a case to be made to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That doesn't mean that it has to be so, or that it impacts the safety of what we do at all. I'm very comfortable with this being used as a folk medicine, especially in places like conflict zones. A number of our members have gotten exceptions for its use in places like after Hurricane Katrina and things of that sort. Our members were some of the first at ground zero after the World Trade Center was hit in 9/11. And so when it's used in emergency situations, in disaster situations, we should have no qualms at all regarding the safety and efficacy. Of course, if you're moving into more of a mainstream situation where the demands of a professional regulation and licensures are required, then that's a different story, and you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But in terms of a rock bottom practice with minuscule likelihood of any adverse outcome, you can't beat this. And I quite frankly think it should be in the hands of every practitioner of healthcare, every community worker that wants to be helpful in their block, in the neighborhood that they reside in, and every person who might be a potential supervisor, whether it's a physician, whether it's a full body acupuncturist who really is getting it in the sense of what we often hold up as the tradition of a barefoot doctor or physician in the traditional East Asian medicine tradition, whether it's a nurse who's supervising in a program where you need ADSs to practice, who may not know all the medical ins and outs of the specialty populations that you treat. But given all those considerations, I strongly feel this is a tool that should be in the hands of every healthcare provider. Even for psychotherapists, if we're talking about psychologists and social workers who otherwise would not have a physical tool to bring immediate relief, it is a wonderful tool to induce a mindful state for individuals that may come in distress before they're ready to begin to learn a process that can take time. This helps to grab people immediately, to establish an immediate sense of engagement and rapport where the client will think, oh, wow, they know what they're doing. I can trust them. They can help me feel better immediately without struggles over, can you refer me to get Xanax? Can you refer me to get Valium? Because folks are in distress and want to reach for what can help them feel better quick, fast, and in a hurry. And if you don't have something like this, then you consider all these other things that sure can bring about a sense of relaxation, but it's not an alert, mindful sense of relaxation. It's more of a taking away of an ability to be alert and focus versus an enhancement of what we like to say, and not your yin capacity, your parasympathetic capacity, your capacity to restore yourself, rather than enhancing, that's what we want to enhance. So that way it's a win-win for everybody, for programs, for the providers, makes their job easier, and it's a win-win for the patients and clients that we serve. Yes, as a matter of fact, our team has taken a position that all the IRB proposals that we have done, the research we have done, we want it to be open source. So yes, we'd be happy to share that. I'm still waiting to hear back from the VA here in St. Pete at the Bay Pines VA regarding a submission to the IRB here, but my colleague in Charlotte has gotten approval. So we will be doing the acupressure bead study there, looking at aggression and anxiety. We would love for it to be a multi-site study. And so I'd be happy to talk with you about that, and we would certainly look forward to sharing the work that we've done in preparing the IRB proposal. Another word for qi, of course, is energy. There are many different types of qi. Yin and yang energy are types of qi. In nada, in treating the ear, our goal is to increase yin. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the increasing of yin can be looked at in medical terms as increasing your parasympathetic tone, which is your ability to restore yourself, to relax. It helps to moderate blood pressure and pulse, helps to decrease sense of distress and anxiety. It also helps you to sleep better. Sleep is a very yin activity. And I remember growing up, coming from a family that was very work oriented. I remember my father saying, "You sleep when you don't have anything else to do," But of course, in the medical world, I'll just add, he was also skilled at being able to fall asleep anywhere at any time, and I think I inherited that trait. So I've been known to fall asleep standing up on a subway in New York. So, but all jokes aside, I mean, we know that the ability to restore yourself, of which sleep is critical, is a big deal. And of course, we as NADA practitioners know that some of the reports that is most common that patients will provide is that they sleep better. It helps them to relax better. And so in terms of qi, what we're looking to do is to tonify yin qi, and that's the goal of the treatment. So the goal is not, and we say that it helps you to relax and that sort of thing, but it is not Valium in a pill. It doesn't do that. And Valium and benzodiazepines, the substances of abuse, all are things that will cause an overall decrease in your qi, whereas the use of NADA will balance out imbalances and will increase the yin component that allows you to have more of a focused alertness. An image that really impressed me is the idea, if you think about the idea of playing the pipe and the cobra that's coming up out of the basket, the cobra is very relaxed as your music's playing, but you step inside the circle of his relaxed alertness and bam, it's also very quick, very alert. And so it's different from the idea of even a caffeine alertness. We know that caffeine now is the #1 cause of anxiety and insomnia. I think about it like we used to talk about cigarettes when I was growing up, and physicians were still doing commercials about who was smoking the best cigarette. Caffeine now, even though it's a cordial substance, is popular, it's everywhere, it's still indisputable that it's the #1 cause of anxiety and insomnia. And so that sort of alertness is one that can interfere with your ability to sleep. It can interfere with your ability to relax. The NADA treatment, on the other hand, is one that will enhance your ability for focused and relaxed alertness. That's has known to be critical in terms of ability to have mental flexibility and creativity. If we look at the history of Coca-Cola, when they used to put cocaine in Coca-Cola before they switched to caffeine, one of the big things about it was to support the long and arduous work hours associated with the coming of the industrial revolution, where the focus wasn't so much on being awake and alert to be creative and mentally flexible. You just had to be there to be alert enough to put that nut in the same place for 12 hours a day, And so the way that NADA does it is much more balanced in terms of our humanity, and the way in which our soul was meant to work. If Sarah is on the call, I'd like for her to feed into that. I'm certainly, would love to see that happen, and would love to be, and would offer myself to be available personally, also as president of NADA, and to offer the resources of NADA to anyone that wanted to pursue program development. Regarding the specifics of the availability of this program, I'd like to defer to Sarah in terms of how to convey that.
I appreciate it. Dr. Carter, I sent you a direct message. I'm actually here in Hillsborough County, right over the bridge from you. And I am presently working on my PhD in tandem with the Beijing University of Traditional Chinese Medicine. And I wanted to see if you and I could connect and see if I could pick your ear on some of the work that you've already done, because I'm heading in the same direction.
Absolutely. Let me give you my phone number. It's 704 and 905-8834. I would love to hear from you, and let's talk about it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I look forward to hearing from you, Don.
Thank you, sir.
I do have a question for Ken. Where do you see the future, like with the COVID and the demonstrations, everything that's going on right now? Where do you see us fitting into that? I mean, especially here in Florida, since we're not able to use any of the needling at this point as an ADS.
Yeah. I'm very impressed with the value of the beads, and I can tell you, I'm a relative latecomer to the use of the beads, having been very enamored with the use of the needles and how robust that response is over the course of a half an hour or so. But I can tell you, even looking to the research project we completed and the publication we mentioned earlier in the show, addressing the use of NADA acupressure at Shen Men acupoint on the ear. So there are a number of us who are working on various online instructionals with regard to the use of the acupressure beads. I know that I saw a wonderful video with Sarah and her son, I believe 5 or 6 years old, putting beads on her ears. So the beads are very simple. They are easy to use, easy to instruct someone in how to do it. So in terms of being concerned about cross-contamination with COVID, I very much suggest the use of beads. The other thing, with regard to the various groups that are at the forefront of the protest in these days, just as those who started Lincoln were at the forefront in their time, we'd really like to have them reach out to us, to have those of our membership who might have connections, to reach out to them from the Black Lives Matter group, to say her name, to BIPOC. We'd really love to be involved as they would like and think we might be useful in adding a healing component to the message that they bring and the tools that they have in their toolbox to affect change.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Ken's suggestion and offer in response to Ruth Ackerman's question about the use of the material. And we have these videos that we create that are available to all and to anybody that requests them just through our website. And so we would really love for people to use it in an advocacy format to help get programs or services started up. Just messages at the office. If I will say, Tanea Watts, who's hosting this conversation, is also a documentary filmmaker, and she does all the editing, and she puts these out very quickly. So you won't have to wait a long time. And we also let everybody know who registered for this call. We send out a follow-up with the resources that get shared in the chat, as well as the recording. So you'll have it right away. And also for people who registered but then couldn't make it onto the call, they'll also have it as a resource. So I would say that that's one area that we have really been focusing on since about the middle of March, is really beefing up our resources and making things available for people. I guess that's been our pivot is resources when we can't provide direct services with needles, and really encouraging people to transition to using seeds, magnetic beads, and any other potential spices or things in your house that you have, so there's no requirement to have to order something online. And really the basic, most simple thing is massaging your ear with your fingers. That is accessible to all of us. And so we really encourage people to take your health into your own hands, so to speak, and take care of yourself and those that you are with.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
In response to that? Following up on the whole issue of the COVID-19 situation and trainings, would you speak to any changes you're willing to make? In the past couple of years, there's been requests not to have our students send us pictures, which was always what I used when people couldn't in person do the training in front of my face. I would have them take pictures of who they were training, and I want to know if there's any, speaking about pivot, is there a pivot in the attitude of NADA toward being able to give trainings distance?
Well, there's a lot of flexibility in training and training styles. One of the things that as I come in as president now, and I'll point out that I was informed that the elections had taken place just 5 days ago. So, where I will stand is that as long as the competencies are satisfied, that's what we stand on. That the training process does require a combination of didactic and direct supervision. And so the PICs are great, especially in terms of follow-up. Once you are confident that the student really has gotten what the NADA protocol is about. And one of the things we like to say is that the protocol is more than a needle, is more than a bead. You can certainly learn where to put beads or needles in a precise location, probably in a matter of hours at most. But how you work with patients, your presence in terms of being with them, how you manage a group, and questions, things of that sort of nature, all that can't be captured simply in a PIC. And so I think that pictures do have a place, especially in follow-up, because we know that points can drift, and people have questions about, should I put it here? Is it, and there's a whole topographical identification of points that Dr. Smith would often point out. He was also adept at locating points by virtue of feel, of temperature. I never was able to get that one, but I certainly do like to use topographical landmarks, things of that sort. That's fine. It's fine to use the pictures for that. But there is nothing that will replace the direct supervision of a student in a classroom in terms of how they manage a class, how they interact with the patients and clients.
Carolyn Rubin.
Carolyn Rubin.
Oh, hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Kenny.
Kenny,
Good to see you
that
again.
last question, you said seeing the ADS trainee in the classroom. You were very specific in saying that. I would want you to say that in the presence of treating people in groups. Not your
I agree.
So would you say that?
Absolutely.
In addition to in the classroom?
Absolutely. As I'm glad you brought that up. And who am I speaking with now?
Floyd Herdrick.
Hey, Floyd. I'd like to come back to an earlier question about a healthcare organization that wanted to do a pilot project as they gain familiarity with NADA in their backyard. I can think of a couple times when breakthrough moments came for me when I offered to treat the leadership of a hospital or a healthcare system. An experience is worth 1,000 words. So I certainly do not mean a classroom in the sense of being isolated from treating, patients and clients. There's a lot of value, and the way in which I like to typically even organize the trainings that I do is to start off very early, having volumes of clients, family members, staff members, curious folks from the public to come in and get complimentary treatments and share their experience. So that is also something, of course, that you can't get from a picture. So yes, Floyd, I certainly meant classroom in a more expanded sense where the world can be the classroom. So.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I got
I'm
confused.
well, thanks. It's okay. How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, I haven't muted Joanne.
Okay. I was wondering if you guys had any questions for Ken, or if there was something that you wanted to remind us to ask Ken.
No, I think he covered all bases as he usually does.
I would like to ask him something. Kenny?
Yes. Is this Joanne? This is Joanne, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
hi, Joanne.
Joanne, the legacy. Can you say something about that?
Oh, yes. Going back to the idea of many of the answers to the needs and questions that we have can be found in what has already been done, in the path that has already been laid in our legacy. I consider that the early founders of NADA and what I considered as the golden age of my time at NADA in the early 1980s is part of a legacy that I would like to see carry forward, restored where it has been eroded by a sense of needing to have over regulation, overly restricted guidelines to the practice of NADA. The legacy there is one of caring for the communities that you serve. The legacy is one of service that is barrier-free as much as possible. I can tell you, even when I trained there in the 80s, there were still notes that had to be done. They were very brief soap notes, things of that nature. Could you consider that a barrier? You could, but it needed to be done. But part of the legacy I'd like to carry forward, as I mentioned, is that is one of keeping paperwork at a minimum, and as much as you can to return to the values of a barrier-free access to a treatment modality that can have just such broad benefit across the whole continuum of healthcare, from crisis and disaster through a phase of being in treatment where things are being managed and there may be periods of relapse and recidivism, to maintenance and even to the wellness of the treatment staff. The questions that came up about the article on beads that I published with my research team last summer even speaks to that it also is very helpful in terms of maintaining wellness amongst program staff as well as patients. So that's the sort of legacy that we have, of having inherited a tool that is one that is unique, and I don't know of anything that can do such a comprehensive job of helping most people most of the time in a better way. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
so good to have you on board again as president. And
Thank you.
blessings also to the other newly elected members. And hey, let's just continue to do this work. Let's continue to heal ourselves and our families and our community. Yes.
Ashe, ashe, ashe.